world of division, how can we relate across differences in faith and belief? Well, in this episode today, I sit down with an Episcopal priest who is the executive director of a nonprofit called the Interfaith Center. I first met the Reverend Patricia Matthews at Brigham Young University's 2025 Religious Freedom Annual Review Conference that happened this last June and was hosted by BYU's Law School. And it was a great event. I'll put a link to the panel discussion that Reverend Patricia and her colleagues did at this particular conference. But what impressed me so much about Reverend Patricia is how sincere she is in wanting to help people of any faith tradition or belief system come together and foster a spirit of love, mutual understanding, and service. So the Interfaith Center that Reverend Patricia leads is based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, here in the U.S., and they run many events throughout the year. The event that they just recently had was called Love Thy Neighbor. Their Love Thy Neighbor event is an annual interfaith service that brings Central Arkansas's faith communities together for an evening of music, shared wisdom, and reflection. And this year, they had over 480 people attend the event, which shows just how popular this event has started to become. In this episode today, you'll get to hear a conversation between me and Reverend Patricia talk about a variety of topics. First, we'll share a little bit about what we have in common, and then we move on to discuss commonalities between our faith perspectives and ideas that we love about each other's faiths. Then we end on a discussion about the Interfaith Center itself. So today, I hope the conversation that we have here in this episode can showcase for you how people of different backgrounds, of different faiths, can have conversations without animosity and without conflict, and instead show you how you can cultivate a view of mutual care and respect and to have sincere engagement with other people about items about belief and faith. So right here at the get-go, I want to invite you as a listener to seek out others who want to work together to make the world a better place where you live. There are many good news stories happening all around us that we just failed to see because of the really difficult environment that we see online and in the country right now, and frankly, throughout the world. So find that goodness that is around you and shine that positive light together out into this world, because as you do that locally in your own communities, you then can build that and start to share it in the digital space. We all can benefit from what you contribute to. So as you choose to go about doing good, consider using hashtags such as hashtag #BeOne or hashtag #BetterTogether or hashtag #Interfaith or hashtag #UnitedAgainstHate, and link interfaith conversations to your message, and I'll be happy to promote the positive content that you are contributing to in this world, both on the podcast and the channel. So with these opening comments out of the way, let's head over to the interview that I had with the Reverend Patricia Matthews. We have a treat today because we have with us the Reverend Patricia Matthews from the Interfaith Center out of Arkansas and Little Rock. There's plenty of things we can talk about, and so what I think we'd like to do is to have the listeners get to know a little bit about you, and then we can kind of work through segments in the episode. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, let me go ahead and share a little bit about Patricia. The Reverend Patricia Matthews is an Episcopal priest living and working in Arkansas, as we said before. She has a deep love of interfaith dialogue and has integrated it into her 26 years of ministry in the Episcopal Church. She believes that peacemaking work through the Interfaith Center is an integral part of a functioning and harmonious society, and we'll talk about that today. She also enjoys things like writing poetry, playing instruments like the piano, guitar, and cello. She says that she does that a little bit. She also is a certified yoga instructor. She's married to James Matthews and has 3 children, and they share a little kitten named Honeybee. That's kind of fun. How old's Honeybee?
Well, I should update that. So Honeybee just turned 2, and we got another cat named Rose who just turned 1. So they are best friends.
Well, it's helpful when when they actually want to spend time with each other and not be at each other's necks. So that's fantastic. I hope they play well with the kids too.
Yeah, same is true for us and our children, right? It's good when we like to be around.
Yes.
And play with.
Well, exactly. And so the first segment that I wanted to kind of bring up today is the idea of in this episode of speaking human to human, kind of who we are, talking a little bit about that. I notice, it's fun. Your last name is Matthews. I'm kind of biased with that, with my first name. And I noticed that we both have 3 children. And so it's kind of fun to kind of see those relationships. But tell us a little about, where did you grow up?
Grew up mostly in Arkansas, but I've lived all around the country, Chicago, Mississippi, Arizona, all around. So, but mostly an Arkansas girl. Did you?
I did. Yeah. I grew up here, and then I spent some time as a Latter-day Saint missionary in Australia among the Aboriginal people mostly, but then spent time living on the East Coast with my particular profession, and did some stuff in the Midwest as well, and a little bit of time in the Middle East and Jordan, and so. It all kind of goes out, but then we come back to our centers, it sounds like. So
that's right. There was a day when I was walking around Chicago, and I thought, why am I not living close to my family? So I just came back home. Yeah.
They have those pull factors. That's our situation as well. To talk a little bit more about some of the things that you've done that are really interesting. I mean, for those who don't know about the El Camino, can you tell us what the El Camino is? Because it's kind of a big deal for pilgrimages and other things, but could you explain a little bit about what it meant to do the El Camino for you? That sounds interesting.
It was so interesting. I mean, I think it was transcendent and life-changing as well. So I can tell you all those different pieces, but it's the Camino de Santiago is actually a bunch of different paths from all over Spain and France. And even there's one in England that all lead to Santiago de Compostela, which is where they believe the body of St. James the Greater, one of Jesus's disciples, is buried. And so I walked for 8 days for 80 miles. There's a whole story that after he was beheaded, the disciples put him on a boat and brought him up and around the coast of Spain, which is where he had been doing his missionary work, and buried his body at this place. And now pilgrims walk from all around to get to see this very holy and sacred place.
What's interesting about that is there's a sense of meaning that comes through a pilgrimage that is not as common in Christian faiths today, at least in the United States. We're not as used to the idea of pilgrimage here, but it just kind of builds that kind of depth and has you do it with other people. It seems like a really neat thing to be able to participate in.
It was, and I went thinking, it was just post-COVID. I went thinking I needed this break and to be by myself and with God, and I ended up every day walking with even people that were not religious. People from all over the world ended up talking and meeting them, and what happened was it just opened my heart back up, because I think during COVID a lot of our hearts got closed down, and so that was a transformative experience for sure.
One of the other things I was going to ask you is, as a priest, as a reverend, you end up doing many things that are kind of really important for the community. So what kind of causes really resonate with you in the community? You talked about interfaith, but is there others?
I'm 57 years old, and I think I'm just really, really lucky that I'm old enough finally that my causes kind of match up with my vocation. So I'm really am passionate and have been about interfaith work, and about being a priest in the world and helping hold the suffering of the world. And so our interfaith community is going out and doing things for the homeless and doing things for children and for the elderly. And so I don't have one particular passion, but I feel like I got lucky and I got to turn my passion into my job, which goals is great.
Nice alignment on that. Great job on that approach. Yeah. Like you, there's many things I love to dabble in and to help in different ways. I think through my life, one of the things that really resonated with me is the idea of helping refugees. I always seem to be helping refugees in different ways wherever I end up living. And so I don't know if that just comes from having met a lot of refugees when I was younger and how I kind of resonate with helping people from those type of communities now. But of course, there's many other ways to get involved, but that one's kind of near and dear for me, and there's always a need.
There's always a need, yeah. In the interfaith world, we work with lots of folks from all different countries, and so I think the Interfaith Center helped resettle 16 families from Afghanistan, along with Catholic Charities. And that brought together people from all different faiths. So I love that that's your passion, because I think that really is a binding way that we say, how do we care for the most vulnerable in our community and help them find a new home and feel that love of God and love of the world wherever they end up being.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm excited to hear more about the Interfaith Center, but stay tuned, everybody. So I wanted to start the segment where we talk about kind of faith to faith. We've talked about how we connect our faiths pretty strongly and how that kind of helps center us on how we extend out into the world. Both me as a Latter-day Saint from the Church of Jesus Christ and for yourself in the Episcopal Church. But what I'd like to kind of start off with is give us a general quick summary about what has been your faith journey. You know, what led you to choosing a path in the clergy, for example, in the Episcopal Christian tradition?
Yeah, so I was raised a Southern Baptist and was that all through my growing up years. And then at college, and some of those beliefs got challenged, I decided to wander around all the different faiths of the world for about 10 years. And I read everything I could get my hands on from all the different faith traditions, saying, what in this is real? What is true? What do people agree on? And what I found was that most faith traditions agree on love, right? And that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. And then I went to an Episcopal church, and I was sitting at the table, and the priest came up and he said, okay, Patricia, let's talk about it. Is the Bible literal or mythical, right? And he just opened up this kind of theological conversation casually, and I thought, oh, these are my people. I can have my broad, open mind and be curious about the world and not know exactly what everything means, not have all the answers, but also have my stories that I grew up with and that are so open.
Well, that's an interesting story, right? Because some folks will stay in a tradition, but then others they'll kind of start to decide what do I believe? In 20s and young life, that's pretty common, and then trying to settle and find what you find to be most important to you and how you relate to kind of this wider world and the universe in a sense is meaningful, and we all strive to find that. I think that's amiable. So on the sense of being in the Episcopal Church, many people may not know much about that. Could you tell us a little bit about the idea of what does it mean to be a reverend, and kind of like where does that title come from? Because some people might have heard it before, maybe people have heard pastor, but what makes that kind of unique in the Episcopal tradition?
Reverend, I think if you think about the word, is related to reverence, right? So I think they're from the same root, which is somewhat connected to awe. And the way that we talk about being reverends or priests in the Episcopal Church, at least the way I understand it, is that we're going to do this particular job. It's a job description. It doesn't make me higher or lower than anyone else in the church. But I hold this particular role of saying, look over here. This is where you should be looking at the awe, right? This is where you should look at God, and being that place where people might catch a glimpse of what direction to look in for to see that awe or that reverence of God.
It brings up a good point of like being a person of faith and someone who is in a clergy position is the idea of pointing to the divine is both a sacred role and also a special role. So that's really fantastic to be able to say that. So in terms of the Episcopal Church, some people might have heard that word before, or maybe even aren't sure how to spell it.
Took me a while.
Right. Yeah. It's not a word many people associate with today. So could you kind of give a little bit of background on the Episcopal Church just to give people kind of a frame of reference?
don't want to go back too very far, but if we hit Henry VIII, right? So at the time, the Catholic Church wanted to had a lot of power and control in England, and the leadership of England wanted to have their own power and their own control, which is the basis of so much of religion, I think. Less theological and more political. And so the Church of England split from the Catholic Church. And then people came from England to settle in America. And a lot of those people were of the Church of England. And so they landed here and they established their religion here. Now, there was a little problem about the Revolutionary War that as a country, we wanted freedom from England. So at that point, also, the Episcopal Church wanted freedom from the Church of England. So basically, they just changed their name. It wasn't a whole lot of theological or ideological changes, and helped establish this country. I think like 32 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Episcopalian or Church of England. Major part of the formation of this country.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, right? Because from what I've read before too, it's before the Revolution, if you were a clergy in the Church of England in America, it would be basically treasonous to join the Revolution against the king, who is part of your ecclesiastical authority. So
yes.
it puts those who were Episcopalian in a very tight position during that period of time. So it's interesting to see that. Now Episcopalian has kind ties to, I'm sure, the Church of England, and to date, comparatively, since that time.
Yes, we made some peace. We are part of the Anglican Communion, which is all over the world. And if we're getting down to some words, there's also, you may come across an Anglican church in America. And if you come across an Anglican church in America, they're actually a splinter group of the Episcopal Church that were not real supportive of ordaining women or of ordaining the members of the LGBTQ community. So they kind of pulled back off, and then they reclaimed that name, but they actually came off the Episcopal Church, not off the Church of England.
ACNA, does that sound right for that group? Okay. I've heard of them before. Yeah, what's interesting because really the Episcopalian faith tradition kind of grows out of American life, and really since the beginning of America kind of is shaped by and shapes the American story, which is interesting because of how my faith is similar in the sense that because the Latter-day Saint tradition began in upstate New York and kind of blossomed during that time in American history in the mid-19th century, it also kind of was shaped by and shapes the kind of the milieu of the United States over the last, century and a half, I guess almost 200 years. And so it's kind of interesting to see how those play out between us.
Yeah, I think that's right. I wonder, it's fun to wonder what your faith tradition would be like had it been in another country, in another time. Would it have evolved differently? So
it's made me wonder. For example, the Book of Psalms is utilized in a lot of traditional Christianity very highly, and I wonder, and even liturgically, right? It's used often in traditional Christianity in the form of worship, and that kind of shows up in our faith, but not as much. And I wonder how that might have been different. For example, if it was in a different space and time, as you were talking about. So
I just want to shout out to the Episcopal Church too. Now, this may be more lore than truth, but our Episcopal system is set up in a bicameral system. We have a House of Bishops and a House of Deputies, and it's really either reflective of our Congress or we helped form it. So it's a little bit up for grabs how much the Episcopal Church actually formed, but the National Cathedral of the United States is an Episcopal cathedral. So
that's right. Yeah, I would say that's probably the first Episcopalian church I've been to when I was young. As a scout, I visited as a 13-year-old in D.C. the National Cathedral and had a great experience there. There's a lot to be seen there. I know in Utah there's there's Episcopalian church in Salt Lake. For those who are down in southern Utah by Cedar City, There is also, I believe, an Episcopalian church there. There's one in Provo, if I'm not mistaken. So we have Episcopalians here in Utah as well. So switching gears a little bit, I wanted to switch over to if we can share a few stories, things that are meaningful to us now that we've been talking about our faith traditions a little bit. Could you share an experience where you served a particular person and how that experience was particularly meaningful to you and while you were doing your faith work?
I'd love to. And I hope I get to hear one of yours, but I don't know if I do.
Yes, I have one. Yeah, I got one.
Good. Well, as a priest, I get called in to do weddings and funerals and all of those different major parts of life. It's one of my favorite parts of being a priest. And one of my very good friends had been estranged from her dad from a early age. Her mom and dad divorced. And her dad had gone into a coma and was in the hospital. And she called me to come be by his bedside. And there we were, her as a full-grown woman, her mom, and her dad, who they had not talked in years. And it was obvious he was really close to death. And so we started singing Amazing Grace. And who knows how it all works, but he started crying. I mean, it could have just been the body doing something weird, but he's in a coma and tears are coming out of his eyes. And that just felt like, I do not know what's going on in this world. I don't know how the bodies work. I don't know how God works, but I know when four people stand together and love people through the forgiveness and through estrangement, that something really healing and beautiful happens. So I felt really lucky to get to be part of that moment with them. Yeah. That's one of my stories.
Wow. I love that. It kind of shows this example of how touching and how real reconciliation can be in a situation. And sometimes it takes time to get to that space. But reconciliation, I think, really is the goal. And I think that's something both our faiths really highlight, being the focus on Christ as this reconciliation of mankind to God, but also to each other. So that's pretty meaningful. It makes me think of a story for me when I was serving as a missionary. This is many years ago. But when we taught the Aboriginal people in Australia, we served their families, we helped them with different things. But for a particular family who had already become members of our faith, when I met them, there's a grandmother whose name was Janice, and she lived with her daughter who had a son. But they had to kind of live on their own. There was no male figures really that were in their lives, and part of that was due to just the climate of the unfortunate things that happen in Indigenous communities today, where there might be either substance abuse or other things that might kind of start to tear apart some families for different reasons. And I remember one time I had known her for quite a few months at this point, and I went over to visit them, and they weren't in the house, and we thought that was strange because usually they were home. And then we walked around the corner of the house, and on this piece of concrete, Janice was just laid out, and she was just wasted. She had been drinking a lot, and when she saw us, she just started to bawl. And the only thing in that moment, I was like, well, what should I do? Like, help her with her substance abuse, or should I help her in this moment to just show human kindness to her and what she needed? And I think that's what she needed. And so, she saw us and called us elders, and she's like, "Elders, I'm so sorry." And we just went up and we just, put our hand on her shoulder, and I'm pretty sure we brought tears to our eyes too. And we were just like, "You know what, Janice, we are just here to help you through this. I'm so sorry that you're so sad." Something had happened with the family, and there was like a really big buildup, and things were not going well. And that's what kind of got her into a slump. And it was just an opportunity to mourn with those that mourn. There was no other, there was nothing else needed out of that experience other than to love, and to love someone by meeting them where they're at in their own mourning. And it was a meaningful experience for me.
In that moment, I mean, I really do think something is true about what I'm about to say. I don't know if I'm going to say it, but in that moment, you got to be the face of God for her. You got to be the face of unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness, unconditional grace. And isn't that the best use of a human life that we can be, is the hands and feet of God on the planet? Just loving people. Like, it's really not more complicated than that.
And yet it can be so hard with our emotions and perspectives to sometimes we forget to be compassionate. We want to be right before we're compassionate a lot of times. And that gets in the way. That makes me think of kind of another quick question I wanted to ask you, which is what one of your favorite stories of Jesus are and why. And I can share mine first this time, but I just thought this would be kind of interesting because that's an important thing that we share in common across our faces, the New Testament and also the stories of Jesus as meaningful and places to steer ourselves in our ethical standards in life. I guess an overarching theme to start is that in the Gospels, what's interesting is that for Jesus, there's many different stories that each Gospel talks about that are like distinct in that particular Gospel, but there's particular overarching themes. And what's so interesting, I find, is that when Jesus is talked about in his relationship to how he teaches others and cares for others, he's almost, it's almost like it's an upside down kingdom. It's the idea that like he spends his time a lot of time with those who are the outcast or the poor. He does speak to those who are from any walks of life, but there seems to be, especially for the time period in which it was written, an overabundance of stories of Christ with women, also those who are sick. And so there's this really neat thing about that. And so one of the stories that really highlights his special power for us is in Mark 8, where it talks about Jesus healing a blind man. And he takes him out of the city, so it's personal and it's kind of by itself. And he heals this man, and he's able to see. And at first, he puts spittle on his eyes, like a kind of like a spit in the ground kind of thing. And it's kind of fuzzy; he can't fully see yet. And then Jesus kind of applies his own healing again, and then the man can see clearly. And what I really love about that story is that, while there's times that we definitely need to be healed physically, and for all sorts of reasons, that story of Jesus can also teach us how God can heal us from our own ignorance and from our own blind spots, right? And ignorance, in many ways, is probably one of the most common sins of omission today. For those who don't know that phrase, when I say sin of omission, I mean where you should have done something, but you didn't do it, or you didn't know to do it. And so I really find meaning in that story because we all need, this divine help or help from outside of us to help remove the scales from our eyes so that we can see more clearly. And a big part of that in our society today could be related to ignorance, the idea that we need to overcome the negative effects of ignorance.
Okay, so I'm going to say something as a response, and I'm really interested to see what
Sure.
you think. Do you think that Jesus had any blind spots? Because, and I'll tell you why, so I'm not setting you up for a complicated debate or anything.
No, go for it.
There's the passage where a woman asks for healing, and he says, I only came for the house of Israel. And she said, sir, even the dogs deserve. I think he called her a dog, and she says, even the dogs deserve food off the master's table. One of the ways I think about that passage is that Jesus, and this is about Christology, how we think about Christ, but that he grew up in a particular culture, and he didn't know, he was in a human body, and he was raised by humans. He was fully human and fully divine. And so what I think is he still was the product of a culture that could have blind spots. And in that moment, she was the face of God to him, showing him one of his blind spots. And the reason I love that story is because what he did was he immediately said, oh, yes, you're right. And I will heal you. And so he demonstrated, even in his utter humanness, what it looks like to be utterly divine. And as soon as we see our blind spots that our culture formed in us, that we repent and return back to love immediately. So that's a dicey question to ask. And so I'm just curious what you think.
That's a great story, and it's a good question. in terms of Jesus himself, I would say one of the tough things with the Gospels is it leaves a lot open for understanding intent, right? And in that story, we don't know full intent, and that could be an explanation for it. Another explanation could be that some people have given is the idea that Jesus, fully well knowing what her response would be, is trying to let her show her faith and then answer back saying, yeah, yes, I will heal you. And I can bring in some restorationist scripture here to kind of highlight some view of how we look at this from a Latter-day Saint tradition. Is we have scripture, and I believe it's Doctrine and Covenants 88, section 88. It's one of the revelations given to the prophet Joseph Smith. And in it, it talks about the nature of Christ. And one of the things that it brings up is this idea that Jesus grew in grace to grace and grace for grace. From our perspective, it doesn't mean that Jesus was just human and then eventually he realized his divine self, but it's the idea that Jesus, just like all of us, grew up from a young boy to being something fully mature, where he had to give grace and then would be able to receive more grace, and was able to have some grace given at this stage, but then grow in it more as he grew older. And all of us are kind of in a similar situation, I think, in mortality, in that we don't have all the answers in front of us. We don't have the curtain, in a sense, is shut. And so we see little slivers, we see little silver linings. And we see the golden nuggets, or we see the breaks in the clouds through the rain. And I think that's where we can grow by giving grace. We also receive more grace. And I think that's a way to remove blind spots as well. So thanks. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. Great question.
Well, just thinking about how Jesus grew, and just, one of the things in the Episcopal Church, we may have inherited this from our Jewish brothers and sisters, but we like to play with theology. We like to pass around these ideas, and that in that way we also grow in grace, right? That it's better to actually have fun, interesting conversations because we're playing with God in that way. So.
Sure.
So should I tell you my favorite story?
Yes, please tell me your favorite story from Jesus.
Well, you may have heard me say this I came to the BYU law conference, but I think Jesus was a great interfaith worker and a great peacemaker. And like you were saying, it's kind of an upside down world where maybe some of the things we care about, he didn't, and he upholds things that we don't. So I think the story of the Good Samaritan, which we all know, but looked at through an interfaith lens, is really interesting to say. A man came and said, how can I walk with God? How can I inherit eternal life? And I think we're already in some part of eternity right now. So how can I be with God right now? And he says, well, he told about the Jewish tradition of loving your God and loving your neighbor as yourself. So he was repeating back some teachings he had when he was a kid. And the guy says, but who's my neighbor, right? Which he launches then into this story. And if you look at it through an interfaith lens, you see that somebody from the guy's own faith tradition passed him by, and somebody's from the guy's own cultural tradition passed him by. And it was somebody from another faith and another culture that stopped and cared for the man. And the end, like that's it. And it reminds me of your story with the woman where you were. To walk with God, we're supposed to show up with people, any faith, any culture, any tradition, not ask anything from them, but just love them and get them out of the ditch as best we can and be the face of God to them. So I love that. That's the whole of it for Jesus, as he said, there you go. You're just supposed to do what you did in your missionary work, is just love them. Yeah.
And it's in his example of the Good Samaritan, he's using an example that the people are familiar with, right? Like he's not using like in ancient history, there's this group of people that didn't like these people. He specifically chose the next door, like the people that lived outside the fringes of Judea, that had some animosity towards those who did. And he specifically chose them to highlight as the example. And in a sense, what's interesting is it's almost part of Jesus's transformative view of taking someone who is perceived to be your enemy against anything. They oppose anything you believe in. They're against anything you believe in. At least that's how you characterize the other person sometimes. And in that sense, take that person and become their friend. Wow, what a different view, right? He really does call people to, regardless of who the other person is, to who is your neighbor? That person you don't like. I guess is a good way to sum up.
I went to I heard it said, who is your neighbor? Whoever you hope I don't say in answer to that question. That's your neighbor. Well, and you're so right that, I mean, if we look at the arc of Jesus's teaching, he did this all the time. So he has a Roman soldier who is occupying his country, and they're hanging people on crosses, and they're taking all their money through tax collectors. And the Roman soldier comes up and says, would you come heal my servant? And Jesus says, okay, I'll do it. Like the very person that should have been his biggest enemy, he just went and healed. So that's the radical love that I think I'm called to follow in my life, for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you're a follower of Christ, we're all called to get outside ourselves a little bit more, and totally, in whatever sense we can. So I really like that. Speaking of things that we like, one of the things I wanted to highlight is the concept of holy envy. So those who are listening that may not be familiar with this term, it's actually really fun. But the idea of holy envy is something that you appreciate about someone else's faith, that you're almost like, wow, that'd be actually really neat if that was in my faith because of how meaningful that is. Did I kind of characterize that right, Patricia, how we describe the idea of holy envy in Interfaith Word? Yeah, I think one of the things that I would highlight about your faith that I definitely love from the Anglican tradition, including from the Episcopalian group, is I love the legacy and use of the Book of Common Prayer. And if I botch this, please correct me, but people might say, what is the Book of Common Prayer? What is that? Like, what do they have, like a different scripture or something? No, what it is the Book of Common Prayer is a set of ritualized prayer that people can pray both morning and evening, and for some traditions to be able to pray midday, such as the Episcopalian Book of Common Prayer. But it was set up a long time ago to help people get into a rhythm of daily prayer, both morning and evening. And back then it used to be very communal. You would go to the church and this is what you would do, morning and night. We're kind of a bit more privatized, or at least individualized today. Not to say you still can't do that, but that's my understanding of what the Book of Common Prayer was meant in the Anglican tradition. And so that's what I found meaningful about it, is the idea that there is this sense of community that, any given time in the world, Anglicans will, or Episcopalians, whatever group from the Anglican faith you're from, will get up and they will pray together. And I find that so meaningful. And then, oh, wait, the sun's going down. Guess what? We're going to pray together again. Doesn't matter where we are. And I find that so uniting. That's such a cool thing about your tradition there. Did I characterize the Book of Common Prayer pretty good there? Is there something you'd add that I kind of missed on the value of that volume for your tradition?
You nailed it. I would add that, also in there are the services for weddings, funerals, and for celebrating communion or the Eucharist, and prayers by the bedside when someone's sick, and several others. But what's cool is then it also means that on Sunday, a lot of people are saying the same prayers in all the churches. And if you get married, you're going to use a similar liturgy that everybody that's gotten married for a long time is using. And those burial words are going to be the same. And often the words you hear in the movies are from the Episcopal prayer book, or maybe they're really close to Catholicism too. We share a lot of those same prayers, but ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Those are in our prayer book. So it is wonderful. It's wonderful. And one of the things I've noticed is so a lot of Episcopal churches still have morning and evening and even noonday prayer during the week. And one of the things that happened to me is I went every morning to morning prayer, and then I went through a particularly hard time with a miscarriage. And all of the sudden, all those prayers had this different meaning. But they were like a scaffolding that I knew and held me up through the whole thing. And so there's something really lovely about that too. Yeah. I'm glad you're such a fan. It's beautiful. There's beautiful prayers.
I mean, it's pretty meaningful, right? That a whole tradition for, like, you're known for many things, but like one of the main things is the Book of Common Prayer, and that will be used in the faith. And one of the things that I find interesting is, for those that don't know, the daily office, or like the what's another phrase for, like, the hours, prayer of the hours, comes from like the monks, or from those that lived kind of the ascetic life back in early Christianity, and developed this routine of prayer, and that continued to today. And so I find that really cool. But it even goes all the way back to Jewish times, right? Because in the book of Psalms 55, it says, like, evening and morning and at noon I utter my complaint and moan, and he will hear my voice. So it's this idea that praying at different times of the day is not just an Islamic thing, which lots of people today think of that. You know, that definitely comes out of Islam, but it was a thing beforehand in Christianity, and before Christianity, it was a thing in Judaism to pray at different times of the day. And what I find interesting in my faith is not many people really know much about this. And in my faith, we don't use the Psalms enough. I think in my faith, people might know Psalm 23 and maybe a prophecy of different things in this altar, but don't really know it by heart, which I think is a travesty, because I usually do, I listen to the Psalms weekly, and it's been really meaningful to me to see that value in my life. In our scripture, even in the Book of Mormon, there's a teacher that says that you need to cry to the Lord in your houses, yea, over all your household, both morning, midday, and evening. And so we'd still see that there's still this practice even in our faith, but maybe we don't apply it, definitely not as well as the Anglicans do. So appreciate you letting me kind of share all the great things I love about that.
Can I geek out on the Psalms for a second?
Yes, please do.
Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons they're so beautiful is because there was the song book, right? And so just like you get a earworm song stuck in your head, like you could get these words of praise or lament stuck in your head, which makes them really useful, especially for our teenagers and our children, but also as we age through our life. Some people that have Alzheimer's, if they've memorized a psalm or a prayer early in their life, will be able to still recite it even when they don't remember much of anything. So it's really powerful. But I once heard this Jewish scholar, she's an Old Testament scholar, and her name is Ellen Davis. And she says one of the reasons she loves the Psalm so much is this. If we say that the Bible is divinely inspired by God, these are God's words to humanity, and if the Psalms are in the Bible, then these words of lament and the full range of human emotions are actually being spoken back to us from God, and showing us that God understands and wants every one of our human emotions, even the ones that want revenge, even the ones that are complaining all day long. God wants all of those things, and that's captured in our scriptures, which I just think is a neat little turnaround that she does in her thoughts.
Yeah, right. I feel the same way about the Psalms, having spent a lot more time in them over the last couple of years of my life. But just the full range of human emotion is expressed in the Psalms. You can find anything from just depression to just overjoyed, and everything in between. And it kind of shows that you can express how you really feel in prayer to the divine, to at least, if nothing else, get it off your chest, give it over to God, let it go. Right. And there's a lot of, that's therapeutic, I think, for a lot of people. So that's fantastic.
Can I share my holy envy about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I got to come out there for the BYU Law Conference. And I was talking to one of the students who had already done his missionary time and then come back to school. And I said, y'all are all so able to talk with all of us and be really welcoming and kind, all of these strangers. And he said that really came from his missionary days where he had to be out in the world kind of, with his group of friends, but really on his own too, and learn how to take people rejecting him or not wanting to talk to him or wanting to talk to him, all that full range of human interaction. And I really love the concept of sending our young people out into the world to rely on God and on their community. Because one of my friends who's an Episcopal priest said, I got done with college and I didn't know what to do. Like, what's the playbook after that? And so that just seems like a really beautiful community thing that y'all give to your young people. It's that scaffolding for life that's just gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the phrases I use to describe missions in our faith is it's the capstone of my past and it's the foundation for my future. And think about that for like for like a youth, right? It's like you've come of age and you want to like cap off your youth. Like what's a positive way to give back to the world where you can do that? Serving others and setting that as your foundation for the future is huge. And so I think that's that really resonates with me. I think there's a lot of good that can be done there. And lots of people serve missions in our faith for different reasons. There's those that go out and proselyte, but at the same time, any person who goes out to proselyte is also doing service in the community. They go out and they help in like food pantries. They'll go help somebody. I helped, I can't tell you how many people I moved as a missionary. I'm going to say we get the call like, hey, we have to move like tomorrow. Like, we don't have anybody to help. I'm like, okay, we'll be there, So.
Had a huge interfaith event for 481 people last week, and we had about 10 of the missionaries come, and they moved all the tables and all the chairs, and we're just so amazing. Well, and I mean, what you're saying about capstone and foundation, I realize I'm name dropping a little bit here, but I got to sit at lunch when I was at BYU with Camille Johnson, who's the president of the Relief Society for the world. She's amazing, but hearing her call story of like, I'm the president of a law firm and I got the call that I needed to do this job and I just said, okay, that form of surrender of your entire life to do this good work, I think that must be the foundation that your missionary work may lay for the rest of this whole life, or it creates a community that understands that so that you're raised up and called in that way. So I was just so impressed with the surrender and the willingness and the kindness to be in the world that I really value in your church.
And what kind of adds to it further is none of all us at the local level and all those that end up serving in that missionary role, it's all done without pay, right? Like this is all volunteer based, and
which blows my mind. That's so wild.
Yeah, with youth today, can you believe someone would say, "I'm going to go do this for 2 years, and oh yeah, I'll pay for it as well." There's those times where, like, say someone who's really wanting to go, we can try and find funds to help them go, right? It's not like we're going to say you can't. And even for those, most people don't know, but regional missions have a mission president, someone that's over the whole mission, and often those are people who are just, again, had regular jobs and are called and asked to go serve for 3 years. They're usually gone for 3 years. So my mission president, he taught at University of Michigan. He taught Fortune 500 companies. That's what he did. And he was asked to just leave that and go. And he did willingly with his family, went to Australia, opposite side of the world, and did that. And he's one of my heroes, but those were kind of the neat things that we try and build, which is that community and that service, that youth engagement at a young age. Well, and I think one thing I'd like to say then as we pivot, because I want to make sure we get to talk about the great things at the Interfaith Center too, but just briefly here at the end of this section, could you share a little bit about the idea of, once we've talked about the good things that we do appreciate about faith, I think that sets a good standard where we can talk about where we can improve across our either interfaith dialogue or the way we treat each other across faiths. So from your experiences, what could you see Latter-day Saints from the Church of Jesus Christ improve either in interfaith or either interactions with your faith community?
Well, I think you've talked to my friend, Dr. Rebecca Glazier, who is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And she is big on, like, just get involved, just get out there and do stuff. Get outside, like you said, your comfort zone. And I do want to brag on the Little Rock, Arkansas, the stake here. They're a part of our Interfaith Volunteer Network. They hosted an event where 100 people came and made cards for people all around the city, and had in Muslims and Jews and Buddhists and Baha'is into the church here in Little Rock. And 35 members of them sang at our Love Thy Neighbor event. And then the missionaries, as I mentioned, came and set up, brought cookies. They really dug into serving as part of their faith tradition here. And the conversations we've had around that when you're doing interfaith work is proselytizing is not really what we're doing in this situation, right? We're just trying to be together and be friends. And so that was a great growing edge for them to understand how to be in an interfaith setting where they are showing their faith in this other way that is maybe different than some of the ways that it is. And it also is helping people to not be prejudiced toward the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because they feel really comfortable and happy and see how beautiful and willing they are to be in an interfaith setting. And, I don't know that a lot of people realize how interested in religious freedom the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is, based upon y'all's history and what you've been through. And it's just been really fun. So just getting out there, I think that would be the way to improve, is go find maybe 2 churches that aren't in your tradition and make a little trio and get together and do some stuff. Doesn't have to be big. It could be making cards for people in a nursing home. Just to sit at the same table is really, really important to be together.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think in our faith, because we are so focused on missions, sometimes we forget that there's also the other hand. You can share your beliefs with others, but there's also the respecting and loving and understanding people of another faith too. Right. And so I see it as they go hand in hand. That's my perspective. Yeah. But sometimes we don't sometimes think about our other hand. Sometimes maybe, some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed, but it's good to learn how to be ambidextrous. There we go. In this space.
Yeah. And a lot of people avoid doing that, maybe out of fear of doing something wrong. Or I've also heard that, it'll water down my own faith. And what we've discovered is when 35 members of your church show up at an interfaith event, that doesn't water down their faith at all. That helps strengthen their faith to walk through the world with other people in respect and love. And so it actually does the exact opposite of what people are afraid of. That upside down world. Right?
I think that's an important point too, because I think people ask me sometimes, they don't understand what interfaith is. They think it means you're just accepting someone else's truth claims completely, and you just like mixing religion into one thing. And for some folks that might be the case, but I'd say by and large, the whole point of interfaith work is to say, I have a particular perspective, you have a particular perspective, let's work together, learn from each other, and that actually improves my own, like, wow, there is good in this world, and it's not just in my little community, it's in other people's communities. And wow, look what value add we can do together.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, amen.
Well, and since we're talking about interfaith efforts, then this gives us a great chance to kind of pivot into the last segment with the Interfaith Center. So could you share a little bit about how the Interfaith Center began and how did you get initially involved in it?
Yes, so the Interfaith Center began from two streams. One was an Episcopal priest who went to the Himalayan mountains and heard in prayer, you need to go help reduce fear and prejudice among the people of the world's religion. Like that clear.
Wow. That's awesome.
Right. And then the other one was a Muslim woman who had children that were being bullied here in Arkansas after 9/11. And one of her kids wanted to fight and one of her kids wanted to just do nothing. And she thought, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a middle way. And they found each other and started doing this work in our community. And it's been going on for about a little over a decade. And we do a friendship camp for kids grades 3 through 6. And we do Love Thy Neighbor, this big event. Like you said, we didn't water down our faith. We have like a Hindu dancer and a Jewish call to prayer. And we had, Dr. Glazier spoke and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sang. So everybody kept their particular identities, but we all did it together and then ate a great meal together. So we do things like that. And we have a great website that we're also working on trying to have some brochures or like a book about how to put on a friendship camp or how to put on an interfaith event. And so we're working on those right now, and those will eventually be out for public consumption because we want to help other people be able to do this in the world.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll make sure to link to your guys' website in the description of the podcast and the video because I think that's a great resource people can turn to. That's fantastic, especially if you live in Little Rock, Arkansas. You should go connect. One question I have here then at the end is tied to the Interfaith Center then is this: how do you become a peacemaker? Because I noticed that seems to be a really important part of your work.
I think for people of any faith tradition, or if you don't have a faith tradition, your philosophical position in the world is to find, I stole this from Eboo Patel, who's head of Interfaith America, and he says in his book on interfaith leadership that it's really important to find a driving story in your own faith that supports this work. So I told the story of the Good Samaritan and the Roman soldier. Like, I feel like it's really faithful to Jesus Christ to go out and love people in the world, that I have that driving faith story. And so one tool for becoming a peacemaker is to find your story, to pray on it, to get really acquainted with it, and have that deep, like, taproot in your soul to peace so that you understand the need for us to love each other as humans on the planet. And then just let that drive you out in the world. Go out and find people to talk to. Go out and find a lady on a bench that's drunk and just love her.
Just love them. Help them where they're at. So I guess you've already mentioned this already, but the idea that people just need to get out and engage with other people. So how can people get more involved in interfaith efforts? And kind of where do they start? Say it's just one person. They don't know what to do. They're listening to this podcast. How can they get involved in interfaith stuff?
Oh, that's just such a great question. I mean, as you saw, ours was founded by a person in prayer and by a person who was responding to her life. But I think it would be to look around in your own community and just find one person to start talking about it with. Go show up at a church or a mosque and just say, I want to talk to somebody. I want to take somebody to coffee. I want to have a conversation. And let that build organically, because there's not going to be one answer. It's going to be whatever's happening in your community and whatever God is calling you to do in the place where you are. You might know somebody at work. You might see somebody in a coffee shop and just be curious about humans and start working on things. You can also subscribe to our newsletter through our website or through Interfaith America. We often put virtual events that people can learn more about interfaith in our monthly newsletter. And so that would be just start educating yourself in other ways. Lots of good podcasts, and I don't know, maybe even listen to your podcast, Matthew.
One could hope that would be useful, and that's the hope here. Well, Patricia, I just want to say we are so grateful that you're willing to hop on here today. You got to help people see what does it take to just meet with someone of another faith, talk about things, meeting them for who they are as a human being, what they see from their faith perspective, and then how together we actually can make the world a better place. So thanks for highlighting that for us today.
Thanks for having me on, Matthew. It was a joy.